Alright, hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today I figured we would dust off my N64 collection and kind of fluff up the boxes, make sure all the flaps are in the right places, like see here. This could use a little bit of work. And then put them into box protectors. So I've got some box protectors here that I gotta assemble, take off the protective film. I've got a dust rag here. The games aren't like particularly dusty, but they have been sitting on a shelf for quite a while without being dusted, so I did want to dust them before putting in the protector. And I figured, instead of sitting there doing this by myself, why not record a video? We can kind of reminisce a bit about the N64. It's been a little bit since I've shown the N64 on my channel and talked about it, so I figured, why the heck not? Let's do it. So, starting off, I figured to get started here, these are really in no particular order. I figured why not start with my first N64 game. So that is correct. Unlike most people, my first N64 game was not Mario 64. I actually got my N64 about a year later, because this game came out just a little bit past a year, in the US at least, in November. And that when I got my N64, this was the first game. I was lucky enough that this came out really close to my birthday, so it was kind of easy to acquire a few N64 games right at the start. And, perks of having a birthday close to December, it's like you kind of get the double dip. Not too close to December, because you don't want to get birthday gifts for Christmas, you know what I mean? But, yeah, I was playing good back in the late 90s with the N64. As you can see, this box does have some creases. I'm sure there's like methods where people are like, oh, you moist it up and you iron it out. I mean, it is what it is, right? I'm just going to try and get this as good as I can. Diddy Kong Racing, in my opinion, is the best racing game on N64. I know that's going to be a bit of a contentious thing to say. Oh, man, this flap is giving me some issues. Flap issues. Not something you want to be experiencing on the N64. Alright, let's start assembling this. Kind of push that off to the side. What I really liked about Diddy Kong 64 compared to Mario Kart, don't get me wrong, Mario Kart was amazing. But Diddy Kong, I just really liked the open world. I love the adventure mode. The adventure mode really made the game. Ooh, I forgot, I gotta take this off first. This is the protective film. And I know everybody in the comments is gonna ask, oh, what protectors are these? I just want to let you guys know, this is not sponsored, this is not paid. In fact, I'm gonna say something bad about these box protectors right now so that you don't think it is. But since everybody will ask, I will just show it once. Collector Protector is the name. I bought a ton of these like a couple years ago, and I'm going to show you like my nitpick about it here soon, but I will say that this like branding of their name on here is by far the biggest fault with these things. You'll see what I mean once I start closing these up. But they are very hefty, they're very thick. But I think they went a little too hard on the branding, and I'll show you what I mean with that. Also, not all of these boxes will have the cart in there. Some of them may not have the manual. I used to take my carts and kind of store them off to the side because I didn't like opening my N64 boxes all the time. Because another fact about me, and you'll probably see this on most of the boxes, anytime I opened boxes when I was younger, I always creased the flap. Like, always. Look, I guarantee you this is creased. I mean, I'm practically creasing this thing right now. Yeah, see? All my N64 boxes will have this. I was super bad about opening my games. Okay, so this is what we got to figure out. So this is going to be the top, and I'll show you why. So whatever I want my top to be, I guess we'll just make yellow the bottom, red the top, I suppose. Does it really matter? I guess it doesn't really matter. So here's the thing when you put these in here, is when you close this up, this branding is a little bubbly. You see what I mean? Like, it kind of like puffs up here. It's hard to see what I mean. But if you were to put this standing up, the logo will kind of like bubble this end here, so it doesn't sit flush. And I was never really a fan of that. I think this should have been a little less extreme with the branding there, like the embezzle or the emboss, whatever you call it. Anyway, yeah, but I loved playing the multiplayer in Diddy Kong, and just the music, the characters. I just liked everything about it compared to Mario Kart 64, and I don't know, it just kind of hit the right notes for me. The single player just really killed it. I think the battle mode in Mario Kart, though, is like slightly better at times if you're playing with friends, obviously. Like, the maps in there are just timeless, classic. There's nothing like some green shells just bouncing all around, But yeah, there we go, first game down. We're not going to spend that long on all the other games because I was just kind of explaining the case, but man, Talk about taking a box that maybe didn't look the best, but when you slap it in a nice box protector, suddenly it looks nice and crisp and clean. So let's set that off to the side. Like I said, these are in no particular order, and that's why we're going to go on to one of the best games on the N64 next. No, I'm just kidding. It's not one of the best games, but I think it is one of the most underrated games, and this is Aiden Chronicles. This one probably won't be too dusty because I picked this one up a few years ago. Unfortunate thing about this when I bought it, I did not realize that apparently the flap has a cut in it here, and I have no idea why. It almost looks like some kid, like, because there's a pinhole here, so it looks like they maybe hung this from a ceiling. Like, look at this, right? It's got a pinhole. Like, what is going on here? So I think they actually, oh, that's what they did. They cut this, and then this is a pinhole. So they, like, tacked it to a wall. I have no idea. There's a hole in the back here, too. Anyway, Aiden Chronicles, I would say is definitely one of the more underrated games on the N64. I was going to say one of the most underrated RPGs, but there's not many of them. The best way of describing this game is like a super ambitious single-player MMO RPG, without, like, obviously without the online connectivity, but in terms of, like, the world building and just the feeling of exploration and going into, like, a cave and just killing some monsters and stuff, it definitely feels very MMO-ish. The thing that really holds it back is the combat is excruciatingly slow, very slow. I'd actually recommend, if you can, if you're the type of person that does emulate, I hear the game is quite decent if you emulate and speed the game up, like put a higher speed on it. Because believe me, if you haven't seen this game before, it is very, very slow. I was able to appreciate it quite a bit though, but when you first start the game, you're going to get into a battle, and that battle may take you like 10 minutes. Like it's such a slow battle. You see what I mean? Once again though, you see at the top, it's like it doesn't sit flush. So crease these in first here, and then we crease this. And there we go. Okay, it's good to go. But if you're kind of desperate to play something new on the N64 and you feel like you've played everything, ooh, hold on, what way did we do this? We got to remember, okay, red, like think red stop, red bed. That means red side down, like this. Right? Which side do I want to display? I guess it doesn't really matter. Actually, yes, it does matter. Red side down would mean if I'm displaying these like this, which I usually do display the green side, that this would be on the bottom. So we actually want to flip that to make it yellow side down, name side down, so that way when we display green, ooh, see that's another thing, the seal here, the seam will be on the green side. Okay, so let's flip this out, and let's do that, we reverse it. But then it gets stuck on the flap in here. This is the dilemma that we have with box protectors. I debated not even doing the box protectors on video, but I felt like people would love watching the struggle. So there we go. Now we've got yellow, so name side down here with this thing here, and then green here with that nice clean side there. Get this closed up. Yeah, Aiden Chronicles. Play it, but don't say I didn't warn you. The game's super slow. Give it a shot. Alright, let's move on to the all-time great Mario 64. So yeah, as you can see, player's choice. Obviously, I was not one of the day one adopters. I wish I was a day one adopter of a day one N64 with a day one Mario 64. I was very envious of people that had that, but it was extremely difficult to get back then, and I couldn't have everything, obviously, so sacrifices had to be made. I was just thankful to get one within a year of it being released. You can see here my box. Oh my god, the flappage here is just brutal. Looking back, I've gotten better at it obviously now, but man, back then it was kind of brutal with the creasing that I used to do to these poor boxes. Oh my god, I can't believe we're almost 10 minutes into this video already. I'll get through as many as I feel like we can get through within half an hour or so, and we'll do more in future videos. Let me know if you guys like this kind of weird alternative content. You know, is this a little too much Dustin with Pete? New series. Anyway, Mario 64. I have actually Mario 64 is one of my most watched games in 2023. What I mean by that is I don't do it myself, even though I have done a lot of speedruns over the years. I like to watch speedruns of Mario 64 once in a while. It's really fascinating to watch like a master at their craft speedrun through this game, especially with all the cool revelations that they discover, like carpetless. You know what I'm talking about if you watch Mario 64 speedruns, but it's just so amazing to watch super skilled players speed through this game super optimally. So even though I haven't played Mario 64 in a very long time, it does feel like I'm kind of vicariously playing it by watching them grind it over and over and over. Will I ever get around to playing it again? Absolutely. It's been a very, very long time, and I'm sure that time will come. See, you get this flap in here, and then what I like to do is you gotta... Oh, also, my mic filters are completely off, so I do apologize there. I figured people would love all the crunchy little noises and stuff. So I put my fingers in here, and I press this flap inwards, so that way it kind of like doesn't poke out, and then you can take this and the yellow side down, right? So we get the green side like this. Oh my goodness, what are we doing here? Like this, right? I don't know anymore. I'll have to redo it if I mess this up. Ooh, look at that crease down the side of the box there. It's okay. These are all of my original copies, so, you know, I would rather have a box that's a bit creased up like this and beat up a little bit. Being able to look at my savage self opening these flaps from back in the day. I'd rather have my original copies than having, like, sold them off or traded them and then regretting it and then having to get somebody else's copy, and it doesn't quite feel as good. Ooh, you know what I also am realizing now? Man, what a weird dilemma this is. This should be the front. Because you see here, now we've got the flaps here in the front, right? And then this should be the front here, because this is nice and clean. So when you look at the cover, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? So from the looks of it, if we want this to be the front, you know what, let's just redo it right now. If this is going to be the front, and I promise we won't talk too much more about these box protectors. So this is the front. What's the dilemma we got to deal with? So it looks like this will have to be the bottom. See, this is an issue I have. No, actually it doesn't have to be the bottom. This can still be the bottom. Right, so that flap is in the back. This is the side. Yeah, perfect. So there it is. Then it can display like this. Alright, anyway. Mario 64. Still one of my favorite games of all time, but, you know, considering I haven't played this game practically, you know, a few years after it came out, like, I haven't played it since a few years. What I'm saying is I played it when it came out, and then I, you know, played it over the years, but it's been like a couple decades since I've touched this, so I think I'd have to revisit it myself rather than watching some speedruns of it to truly know what I really think of this game now. I know what I'm going to think of it. I'm still going to love it, but is it still worthy of being like a top 10 game of all time for me after all this time? Time will tell. I'll have to find out. Alright, let's move into one of my other actual favorite games on the N64, and that is Snowboard Kids. Ooh, the flap here is... This box is mint. Outside of... We got a little crease here in the flap. Let's see if we can do anything about this. And then you can see, once again, past me leaving my mark on that disgusting flap damage there. But you know what? It's part of the history, right? Part of the history of the box. Okay, we fixed that a little bit better. Otherwise, man, this is pretty clean looking, pretty clean. Just give it a quick dust. Gotta say, for how long these were on my shelf, there's almost, like, you can see there's really not much dust coming off of here, but I do want to make sure that we are sure that we get any dust before we stick these in a protective film. This is, this game has moved up the ranks recently over the years. I used to consider Diddy Kong to be number one, Mario Kart, and then, you know, a close third would be Snowboard Kids. But let me tell you, I started playing this game a bit, like, about 5 years ago. I started doing some, like, time trial speedruns and such, and I just started, like, grinding away at the game, and I just really fell in love with it. And I feel like Snowboard Kids 1 is now almost neck and neck for me with Mario Kart and Diddy Kong. It's not quite there. It's not, like, number one. It's not, like, tied, but it's up there, boy. It's definitely one of my favorite racing games of all time now. The music is timeless. The skill involved with the way that you have to kind of navigate the courses, it takes a lot of skill if you've never really taken the time to try and master turning in this game. And when you do time trials and stuff, you use, what's his name? Bobby or whatever, the guy that wears the green clothes, since he has the highest speed. Ooh, I forgot this protective film back here. Forget to get both ends. Oop, we closed it, the flap still has some of the plastic. But I think what really helps make Snowboard Kids for me is the sense of style. It's just so bright, so cheery, so colorful. And the track designs are all different and unique and memorable. And even though it's a game called Snowboard Kids, there's a lot of tracks that don't feature snow. So it actually really helps the variety of the racetracks for me. And it's really something that I can easily come back to time and time again because every level just feels so different from one another. Okay, so let's just make sure we do this right. So put this backside down, push that flap down here, front side in. Boom, nice and clean. The green side doesn't... Oh, it does have a flap there. Oh my goodness, we put it in the wrong way. Okay, so how do we do this? Like this. Yeah. Like that. That way green side has no flap, no seam. Let me know what you guys... How do you display your N64 games? I always display mine standing up. Green side out because, I like green. I think it's a nice, easy way to display the games. A lot of people, I think, prefer blue. I really like green. Let me know. Like, I'm sure it's like an age-old war. Green side, blue side, maybe some crazy people do yellow. Maybe some really crazy people do red side. Who the heck knows? All right. I mean, we might as well just go into it, right? The follow-up, since it's right here. Ooh, this is a really... It's been a while since I've held some of these. This is a mint. Ooh, my goodness. I don't think there's any problems with this. And I did pick this up many, many, many years ago. But it was during a time where I think I was getting better at the flappage opening. This is clean. Ooh. Yeah, that's a nice box. Snowboard Kids 2 I didn't quite get into as much. I felt like they tried to add a little too much to the game. I like the simplicity of Snowboard Kids 1 way more. I'm also just incredibly nostalgic for the music in that game. I don't think the music is quite as good in Snowboard Kids 2. But yeah, they added a lot of different modes. I didn't quite care for the new characters that they added and all the little changes. It's been admittedly quite a while since I played the game because I know anytime I play Snowboard Kids 2, I just think about Snowboard Kids 1 and how much I'd rather play it more. And I know that's not a sentiment that a lot of people share. I know a lot of people do consider Snowboard Kids 2 to be the superior game in every way possible. But for me, it just never quite hit those same strides that the first game did. Real quick tidbit here before we pack this up and move on to the next game. If you are a really big fan of Snowboard Kids 1, you obviously probably know about the DS game, which I think is actually quite good. I visited that a couple years ago and was actually kind of I wouldn't say blown away, but impressed by how good that game is compared to my memories of it. I think a lot of people wrote it off originally because it didn't feel Snowboard Kids, especially with the character designs, but it was pretty good upon revisit. All right, let me think here. Why do I got to keep thinking how we do? Okay, so we go like this, and then green side out. Perfect. Be careful not to do anything bad to this box. Okay, it's getting snagged at the end here, so what we got to do is you got to go back in, surgically press down that flap. Man, this sounds so... It's a video game video, okay? If anybody's just listening to this, significant others out there, video games. Box this up. Press it in nice and gently. Don't want to nick any of these corners. Perfect. Nice snap to it. There we go. That is a mint as mint can. It is complete. Nice and hefty weight to that. But I was going to say the PlayStation 1 Japanese Snowboard Kids Plus is actually a sort of like semi-remake to Snowboard Kids 1. Only came out in Japan, only on the PlayStation 1. A lot of changes, enough changes to make it worth playing. It's kind of its own game, so if you're a really hardcore Snowboard Kids fan, you should really check it out. Oh boy, what games we got? I'm looking at my stack here. Which one do I want to do next? Since we just did some racing games, let's move on to... let's do this one here. All-time classic. Paper Mario for me came out at a time that was just absolutely perfect. This is also, once again, I'll let you know if there's a game here that isn't like my original personal copy, like Snowboard Kids 2. I did buy that on eBay. It wasn't like something that I got brand new in the store. Man, this thing is mint as mint can be. I pretty much bought this, played the game, and it's just sat securely on a shelf ever since. Paper Mario came out at the perfect time for me because it was around the time where I was just starting to get into RPGs. I had, found out how amazing Final Fantasy VII was finally and got into turn-based combat for the first time. And this just came around right at the right time. It was, it was aimed at someone like me, somebody that is just getting into RPGs. And I absolutely loved it. I just marathoned this game. I just remember sitting on the carpeted floor, playing this game late into the night. It's not a long game, but let's just say that, the probably like week that it took me to beat it, I'm not sitting there playing it for like 8 hours a day. It's crazy, but a few hours a day. I'd say it took me a week to go through the game. Loved every second of it. Paper Mario, I wish the series would go back to the roots. It's nice that we're getting a Thousand Year Door remake, which I didn't dabble into quite as heavily. I'm really, when it comes to the Paper Mario series, the only one that I ever gave significant amounts of time to was the original. I will admit to you that, and I do look forward to diving into Thousand Year Door remake. But just the super simple nature of the original game, how easy it was to pick up and play, all the characters were likable, and it just came out of left field. I think that's the kind of thing about Thousand Year Door that I think didn't resonate with me so much, because we knew what to expect, right? Like, we knew what Paper Mario was at that point, and I've always tried to tell people why I never really played that game too much, and now I think I'm just thinking of this now, and I think I know why. It's because when the first Paper Mario came out, it was so left field. We were just completely blindsided by a comedic paper-style turn-based RPG with, Mario RPG on the Super Nintendo style combat with like the timing and everything. I mean, it was just unlike anything we had ever seen before. So when Thousand Year Door came along, it was more of the same, if not better in many people's eyes. I'm noticing there's like scratches on this plastic that I do not like. There's like a giant scratch. You probably can't see it. But yeah. Even though with that protective film, it's still getting a little bit of issues here. Okay, make sure we're doing this right. That looks good. Perfect. I do want to go back and play Paper Mario at some point in the next couple of years for sure. Maybe even before Thousand Year Door comes out, to kind of just freshen up, get ready for the remake. But yeah, absolutely one of my top N64 games. I know I made like a top 20 or top 30 list or whatever years ago. I don't remember what the heck the order of that list was anymore. I'm sure things have moved around for sure at this point. But the general framework is probably quite similar. All right, how about we do a couple more here? Let's move on to another one. This is the benefit. This game means a lot to me because this was actually gifted to me for Christmas from my uncle. And boy, let me tell you, it meant a lot to get games back then. I knew how expensive these games were. It's not like I was a naive kid where I was like expecting these kind of games for presents. No, I was very appreciative to get a game for Christmas or birthday from any family member, any extended family member. I knew how much these costed, and I cherished any N64 game that I received. This was no exception, even the worst of the worst games. And we'll get to those in the future. There's some really stinkers out there that I received that I still was just, I still played the heck out of them. I still appreciated and liked them as much as I could. And, as a kid, we weren't quite as cynical. It's not like we were professional game reviewers or anything, right? Like, we just played what we had and we dealt with it. Sure, your friends may have had better games, but you just kind of played with the cards you were dealt. Bomberman was one of those games that I was given, and oh man, one of the perfect games to have received. I remember getting this and one more game. I might as well say I got Mortal Kombat Trilogy and Bomberman 64 that same Christmas from my uncle and aunt, and my grandmother was alive at the time as well, so it was sort of like a gift from all of them. And yeah, it was super fun. Before Bomberman 64, I had only really played Bomberman a little bit, I think on Sega Channel. I definitely had played Bomberman, but never really like played Bomberman, you know what I mean? Just sort of like a distant memory that you played, but you never really got too into. But Bomberman was like my Bomberman. I absolutely loved these levels, right? Like, I don't know if they show... Oh, this level right here. That is one of the best designed Bomberman stages in the history of the series, as far as I'm concerned. I forget what they call it. It's this one with like the multiple levels. Throwing the bombs around there, avoiding the water as it raised up. Such a classic stage. There were a lot of really good levels in Bomberman 64, but that one in particular, it is funny that they show it on the back because that was my favorite. Just an absolute, an absolute blast. Single player, I wasn't super fond of. Did I play single player? Yes, but it was absolutely a game where even if I didn't have friends over to play at the time, and luckily I had some friends when I was younger where we used to play N64, do multiplayer, and I think that's integral to your experience with the N64. I do feel like people that maybe grew up with the N64 and didn't have friends that can come over on a regular basis and play N64, I do think that would greatly change your perspective on the console and your experience with it. Because these games are meant to be played multiplayer. Most of them are. They're just so multiplayer centric. Even the games that had a robust single player that also happen to have really good multiplayer that some people may not have realized. Like one that I really like that not a lot of people talk about with multiplayer was South Park 64. I thought South Park 64 had a fantastic multiplayer mode that most people probably never really knew about because they kind of just considered it a single player game. But anyway, I know this one's a bit controversial. And oh man, it's been so, let me tell you guys, it's been so long since I pulled these games off the shelf. Not gonna lie, they have been on that shelf, my N64 games, since, you know, my second game room tour from all those years ago. They used to be in a different spot, and then I think they moved. They used to be under my N64 sign. I don't remember, but they've been sitting there for over a decade, and if I haven't played them, they've just been sitting there. So to be able to take these games off the shelf and just kind of look at the box again and appreciate the box art and just see my original copies like this, I'm just glad that I collect physical games. It makes it worth it. But anyway, I know this game's a bit contentious because of the 3D space that it kind of deals with, but I think they did it quite masterfully. There is a, kind of like losing my voice here, there is a Saturn Bomberman that I want to quickly recommend, and it's not Saturn Bomberman. It's a Bomberman game called, I believe, Bomberman Fight, which also uses 3D arenas very similar to Bomberman 64. It's exclusive, super playable, so if you have a way of importing and playing Japanese Saturn games, you should definitely check that out. Okay, let's do this one. So this one here, I remember being incredibly hyped to get Harvest Moon 64. Now this game I picked up, I vividly remember it. I was in a mall, not my local mall, it was like a pretty far away mall, and I went into an electronics boutique, and I remember seeing this game on the shelf with the box, and when I went up to the counter, they did have the manual, they had the cart, obviously, for $40, I think it was, like $40-50. It was super cheap, and I knew at the time I was very in tune with collecting games around that time. So I knew what I was stumbling into, and around that time, Harvest Moon 64 was about a $70 to $80 game complete in box. And yeah, I never forgot it. It felt like I had found and unearthed some kind of like a literal hidden gem, because Harvest Moon was notorious for around that time for being one of the absolute hardest N64 games to find. Now, you might be like, oh, but Pete, there were games way harder to find. What about Stunt Racer? What about that Super Bowling game? Yeah, there probably were way harder games to get, but let me remind you, this is during a time where we didn't have YouTube. YouTube wasn't, really a thing back when I was learning to collect on digital press, and everybody just relied on word of mouth. What did you guys find in the wild? What games did you see? We had physical rarity guides where people would try and keep track of like rating a game on how hard it is to find, and Harvest Moon was considered to be one of the hardest to find N64 games. The print run wasn't as high as other N64 games, and there was high demand for it, right? It's a Harvest Moon game. So I remember just being really floored finding this game in the wild of all places in the EB Games. Not something I ever expected, and I loved it. Harvest Moon 64 just has a certain look to it that I don't think any other Harvest Moons quite nail, even Back to Nature. I just highly prefer the sort of blurry, Vaseline-y sort of, this sounds terrible, the just sort of like more rounded edges, blurrier sprites in this compared to what you would get in Back to Nature, which has a bit more, that sort of like more crispy PS1 sort of look to it. I don't know how to describe this. You guys know what I'm talking about if you've played this. I also find this one to be a bit more simplistic. I enjoy the music. I know they're very similar to one another, and most people do prefer Back to Nature, but this game always meant a lot to me. I just have a lot of memories playing this on my old CRT. The music was just stuck in my mind, and I remember just kind of laying in my bed on a lazy weekend after school, just kind of chilling, milking my cows and farming the plants, and it has astonished me how much this series has blown up. I remember I used to frequent a website called, I think it was called HM Farm. It was a huge Harvest Moon fan site that covered all the games in the series, and I used to go there all the time to kind of get like some insider info, and it always felt like such an underground series, even though it was really well known, because back then, farming games were, people were like, why would you play a game where you farm? Like, why not? It's just like work, right? But if you played the series, you understood what made it so special, and now looking back at it, the farming series and farming games have just blown up so much. There's so many farming games, and all of them can really attribute all of it to the Harvest Moon series. This isn't my favorite Harvest Moon game, however. My favorite Harvest Moon game, and I haven't played a ton of them, I will admit, is Save the Homeland on the PlayStation 2. More specifically, I guess you can say the PS4 version. All right, let's do one more. I don't want this video to go on too long. I'm also not sure if most people are going to make it this far in the video. If you have, by the way, and this is your first time watching my videos for some reason, yeah, consider subscribing. I do all kinds of weird alternative content like this sometimes. We're just a collecting focus channel. Bit of an old school kind of vibe to it. No crazy editing here or anything. So if you enjoy the sort of like old school vibes, it's kind of what we do around here. Let's close on this one. I've been on a big Star Wars kick lately, and I will say I am a huge appreciator of Star Wars Episode 1, not just like the game, but the movie as well. I have really, really grown to fall in love with Phantom Menace, and, you know, back when I was younger, I really liked it, but I think you kind of get caught up in that sort of toxicity of the general fan base, the older fan base back then that hated Jar Jar, that hated these characters, hated the story, and you kind of get swept up in it. You're like, yeah, Jar Jar, he's no good. But looking back on it, I love Jar Jar now. I think he was a great character. For what George Lucas was trying to do with Phantom Menace, I think he really nailed it. I just love everything about the soundtrack in that movie. The fight scenes are amazing, and it's just got such a cozy sit down and watch kind of Star Wars movie. Maybe it's just because I'm really not the biggest fan of the sequel movies that makes me appreciate the prequels even more. But anyway, I've been really like getting into Star Wars as of late. Again, not so much the sequel stuff, but like, the original trilogy and the prequels. So Star Wars Episode 1 Racer. I wanted to mention this one because I did play, not a lot of people know, there's still a lot of people that are unaware that the game has been, like the PC version of the game has been ported to consoles. So I think they just call it Star Wars Racer or Episode 1 Racer. I forget. They kind of like abbreviate the name a little bit. And I revisited that a couple years ago, and my goodness, what an absolutely stunner racing game. It's still brutal, still very, very difficult, but what a challenging game. Like, you are literally almost on the edge of your seat playing this, and the hairpin turns and like making one mistake and blowing up and just barely finishing a race at the speeds that you go through in that game. It's one of the best racers when it comes to sense of speed and feeling like you're really going, like they say here, feel the force 600 miles an hour 4 feet off the ground. Like it really feels like you're going 600 miles an hour. And it's one of those racing games where it's mostly silent. The music kicks in at the right moments, when you're just barely able. Oh, this is not completely detached. Okay, there we go. Push that down. It's a near perfect sort of like sense of speed kind of racing game. Super difficult. I can go without all the part buying and everything. And yeah, I'm talking about the HD remaster here, but I did first play the N64 game. And I think for what this was when this came out, like this is still cutting edge for the N64 with how the game, the performance of it, from what I remember, right? Like I would never really go back and play the N64 version. I would just do the remaster. But in my mind, when I was younger, this game just kind of knocked it out of the park the most when it came to sense of speed. But I will say I still have not played the Extreme G games that are on the N64. And of course there's F-Zero. Don't get me wrong. That game is fast as heck as well. But this is my childhood game. I grew up with this and played this way more. I just rented F-Zero, but this was my super duper fast racing game. So, all right. Anyway, guys, it is getting pretty late here. I'm recording this pretty late after I just ended a stream tonight. So I've still got, a pretty healthy stack of N64 games to go through. So if you guys like this style of video and you kind of just don't mind me sitting here packing up, dusting off, and protecting my N64 games while we're kind of just reminiscing about N64 and whatever the heck else comes to mind. Leave a like, leave a comment, let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you very much for watching.